Welcome to Think Queerly, a thought leadership podcast that cultivates inclusion, understanding, and social evolution for a more accepting, equitable, and humane world. I'm your host, Darren Stehle. I'm a personal leadership coach who empowers LGBTQ plus creators and change makers with their self-mastery so that they can accomplish their goals, create a life they love by doing what they love, and make a difference in the process. Now, I'm really excited to have today's guest, Mark J. Silverman, on the show. He's an executive coach, author, speaker, and a podcast host. He works with CEOs around the world, turning their fast rising high achievers into effective leaders. He's the author of the best-selling Only Tens 2.0, Confront Your To-Do List, Transform Your Life, which has sold over 70,000 copies to date. And he's the host of the podcast Mastering Overwhelm, How to Thrive in Business, Relationships, and Life. Only Tens 2.0 is a brilliant book. I've read the original. I'm making my way through the 2.0 version. His Mastering Overwhelm podcast is really insightful. I've listened to a number of episodes and I've always learned something new. He's a great speaker. I hope you will enjoy this episode. Mark, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
It's a pleasure to come up to Canada.
Well, you were just up here recently. You were up here about 2 months ago.
In the spring, I brought home Canadian COVID. I was really appreciative.
Oh, crap. I'm sorry to hear that. I didn't know that.
I was out of commit. It was pretty bad. I got home and I was so sick. I had avoided COVID the whole entire time. Go to Canada, do a bunch of speaking gigs. By the time I got home, I could crawl into bed.
Yeah, that's the problem. I mean, we can still be around so many people and do our best, but well, I want to briefly let people know where we met. I've known who you are for a very long time, but not known you. Many years ago, I worked with a coach, Jen Gresham, and she's worked with Coach Rich Litvin.
By the way, you have to say the brilliant Jen Gresham.
And she is. I mean, what she's doing now is quite incredible. But she referred me to read your book because I was having trouble prioritizing and doing what was most important. And, you know, I can relate because you've said you're ADD. I grew up and I was diagnosed ADHD. I was on Ritalin for a couple of years as a little boy. Didn't stay on that for very long because my story is, and I don't remember the story because I don't remember much of that period of time in my life because the Ritalin blocked my memories.
Interesting.
Yeah, but my parents said, as a little boy, I came to them and said, I don't feel well. I don't want to take this drug anymore. And thankfully, even though they struggled with little crazy hyperactive Darren that they knew was going to be bouncing off the walls again, they said, if our son is saying to us he doesn't feel good on this, we're going to have to find an alternative. That's the reason she passed on or suggested to read your book, Only Tens. And you've come out with the 2.0, and we're going to get into that. But then I was in a writing program in May, Ship 30 for 30. And you were in there. And I thought, I think this name is familiar. And then I looked you up and followed you. And I'm like, ah. And then we reached out and connected to each other. And I just thought the bonus was, I didn't know you were gay. How cool is that? So it just seems like it's such a small world when these little connections are made, if not through the internet, then just by the course of finding yourself in one program and there's somebody you didn't know you knew, but who you then got to know.
Are you sure that you reached out to me? Because I'm pretty sure I read some of your stuff and gave you a compliment because I really liked where you were taking your writing.
Oh, thank you.
I think I reached out to you.
You reached out to me. That is right. You are absolutely correct. And thank you for pushing the compliment. That was actually a really meaningful thing that you did for me because this might be something we can talk about in general. I have been writing for a very long time. I've published, I don't know, we're getting close to like 600 articles over the last 10 years. This is my 240th podcast episode. I know you're somewhere over 300, I think, like that. So
450, thank you.
You know the work that goes into creating, right? And how much effort goes into it, whether you're doing it yourself or whether you're having somebody do the post-production work, there's still so much effort that goes into it. Plus, we're on the camera here. We're having to show up hoping that we're being our best selves, not second guessing ourselves. And I just thought, here's this guy who's, in my mind, made it. who was recommended to me as a coach I should read, and who's giving me a compliment about my writing. So it was very well received. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
We could start right at a little bit about who you are and how you got to where you're at. I mean, you're a gay man who just turned 60, kind of challenged by that, but sort of celebrating it at the same time.
Challenged before, freed after. 60 just rocks.
Tell me about that. What was the change? Why was that so trepidatious, so problematic? And then why did you transform literally on the other side of it?
Couple of reasons. There's some of the typical reasons turning 60 is kind of rough.
Yeah.
Because, I kind of lean on my looks and my charm and my, I'm not saying a movie star, but like being attractive and being charming and,
Right.
and that kind of thing is a thing for me. Right. And
Right.
and I hate to admit it, but it just is.
Mm-hmm.
And, when you're, coming in on 60 for me, it meant that at some point that one of the tools in my tool belt to cope is going to go away. Right. And, so how do I deal with that? Because I didn't have the confidence to stand on my own 2 feet, right? That kind of thing. So that was one piece. Another piece was, you can spend many, many years going, I will get to this. I will get there. At this point, I'm going to be this kind of person. At this, I'm going to accomplish, and time just starts marching on.
Yeah.
Right. So the time between 1 and 25
Mm.
is a lot longer than the time between 25 and 50. Right. And then 25 to 60 is about 50 to 60 is about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And you start to see the grains in the hourglass starting to go.
Yeah.
And for me, after I turned 59 and I was heading towards 60, it got very clear to me that there's no more time.
Yeah.
Like now, if I'm ever going to be the person I said I wanted to be, it's now. If I ever want to accomplish what I said I want to accomplish, it's now, right? In my relationship, I'm not going to go out and look for another great love of my life if this relationship doesn't work out. I'm not saying you're dead at 60. I'm saying it's time to start to go, I've created a life. I've lived my life. I've raised my children, right? So I happen to be a gay man who has, 2 adult children. It just started to close in, and there were some things that I wanted to be, things there was more rather than accomplish. It was more there was a mark I wanted to be.
Yeah.
That I wasn't quite there. And as it narrowed and I started getting towards 60, I went and did an ayahuasca journey. And ayahuasca was both cruel and kind and showed me exactly the things I was talking about. So, it was a few months before I turned 60, so that when I turned 60, I was ready. And the day I turned 60, I got a lion tattoo on my arm. And I committed to being the person I wanted to be. And when I woke up on my 60th birthday, I just felt free and joyful and excited about life. And I haven't been this revved up about creating in the world in a long time. And I'm pretty revved up in general. And, something lifted in being 60. And there's an urgency without it being desperate. It's like, there's an immediacy now to life that just is so exciting. And there's also just a dropping of away of, there's a bunch of shit that just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And so I'm just so happy being 60.
Well, it's, what you've described, or what I'm hearing anyways, you created a very unique and ephemeral, in a sense, like a one-time ritual. You were experience all of this discomfort. You figured out, okay, I've got to have a plan to deal with it. And somehow it managed to all come together and triggered, so that when that date hit, when you the clock turned and you're like, I'm officially 60. This is when I came out of the womb 60 years ago.
Giant lion. Don't never underestimate the power of a giant lion tattoo visible on your arm for everybody to see. That's my stake in the ground, right? So I can't ever forget who I am and how I want to create myself every day.
Well, it's interesting. Like, I mean, I don't know if it can be seen. I mean, I've got this little tattoo on my arm here. It's like
I
a stick
see.
figure with a little heart in it. And that is the same tattoo that my partner has. We're not of the camp that wants to get married. I'm not a fan of the institution, but this is as close as we will get to having a ring because we don't have rings either. And we've been together for 11 years. And I remember having a conversation with somebody when I was still a personal trainer. He's like, why would you get that? Why would you have this tattooed on you? I'm like, because you don't understand how I feel. And then he said, but what if you break up? I said, then this will be a wonderful memory of all the joy we had together.
Nice.
You know?
Nice.
And so just the framing of that ritual, of that mark, same with your lion tattoo, I think is so important because that's sort of like a stake in the sand or the mark that Mark is making about where you want to go and who you want to be.
Exactly. I create myself every day.
Yeah. There was something I wanted to mention. You were talking about relying on looks and youthfulness. And I thought I was really fortunate to have attended one of Jim Rohn's leadership weekend seminars many years ago. I think he was 73 or something at the time. And he was already using sort of the podium to hold himself up a little bit. And I was able to like shake his hand amongst like 100 other people or whatever. And he's sitting in a chair. But there's this distinguished Southern gentleman who's ailing, but his age didn't matter because it was his charisma. And I'll pay you the compliment because you have charisma.
Thank you. Thank
So
you.
if you think all the looks are failing, fall back on your charisma, honey.
I appreciate that.
Well, I want to get into, you've written a number of books, and I want to touch on some of the concepts from Mastering Overwhelm. And then I'd love to hear you bring in other aspects of your journey and what that means to you with respect to self-mastery. And how I'd really like to frame this, Mark, is like my audience is LGBTQ. So I work with, and I love to speak with like creators and change makers. Your audience is like C-suite executives. Who you're helping to get out of their own way because they're overworked, overtired, and they're not prioritizing what's most important to them. Is that like a good synopsis?
Yes, and also just learning how to lead on a leadership team. So that's basically what I do almost all day, every day.
Perfect. What you just said there is helpful because a conversation I had with another coach in a podcast that'll be coming out, I think, this Friday, was the challenge for somebody who might be identified as LGBTQ, who may decide at the higher level of leadership to not come out, but instead to try and fit in. Mm-hmm. And while that might not be your ideal client per se, there are aspects of showing up as the leader you can be, and whether or not that's relevant, I think, to your position and how you can lead others by being more authentically yourself. It doesn't mean necessarily that you have to behave in a different way. It just means that if there's nothing you have to hide about yourself, there's a freedom in being all that you can be and all that you set yourself up to be.
Sure. Yeah. So we'll talk about how I present myself in the world.
Yeah.
So I'm not in the closet by any means. I'm married to a man, right? There's nothing I'm hiding.
Yeah.
But the first thing I tell people isn't the fact that I'm gay, right? So I'm very conscious of not being a gay executive coach.
Yes.
I'm an executive coach who happens to be gay.
Yes.
Right. So that for me, that's very important. So if you're going to be, I think I told you before we turned on the mic, I do coach executives at GLAD.
Yeah.
Right. So I do coach in the community. But again, that's not my calling.
Right.
Right. I came out, after being married and having kids and getting divorced. So a lot of men come to me when they're in the middle of that hell, of telling their wives, of separating, of their wives losing their shit over it, right? Because it's such a destabilizing thing, of trying to figure out where the kids fit in and all that stuff. So I spend a lot of time counseling and loving on men who are just in the middle of that hell and helping them get to where it's good,
Yeah.
right? So, where I'm like, I promise you, you will have a relationship with your children, right? I
Yeah.
promise you, your wife may not, get really warm, but she'll calm down, right? That kind of thing. My
Hmm.
ex-wife and I have such a wonderful relationship. Um, so I'm very cognizant of what you're talking about. So for gay executives who are in the world,
Hmm.
there's certain things I can say to a gay executive that
Hmm.
a straight coach can't say.
Yeah.
Right. So there's certain mannerisms, and I'm not even talking about effeminate Adam. There's certain gay license that we give ourselves in
Yeah.
certain situations to have a certain attitude, to be a certain way
Yeah.
that just doesn't fly in the C-suite.
Hmm.
Right. So I can say to someone that shit doesn't belong
Hmm. Hmm.
because I'm gay, right? Like,
Yeah.
so like, let's understand where you are and what you're not hiding. You're not being inauthentic. You're being professional,
Yes. Right.
right? Just like bro speak. If I'm talking to a straight guy, like bro speak doesn't fit in the C-suite, right?
Hmm.
Let's talk about that. We are
Hmm.
adults, and that kind of stuff doesn't belong there. So I'm very clear on that. But
Hmm.
never would I ever say don't be authentic. Put a picture of your spouse on your on your desk. You talk
Yeah.
about your spouse. I remember the first time I brought John. John and I were just dating back then when I was in the tech industry. I was a sales guy in the tech industry,
Yeah.
and you want to talk about bro culture, and I was terrified of coming out. I remember when I told my boss I was gay, and he goes, "No wonder you're so nice." He goes, "And no wonder you dress so well." I'm like, "What?" Anyway,
Yeah.
so I brought John to a trip to Belize, and for my company as my spouse, right? As we
Mhm.
get to bring a plus one, and every year I always brought my wife, right? And now I'm bringing this 6'2" dude to
Yeah.
the thing, and it wasn't a problem.
Yeah.
In fact, people were so kind and bent over backwards to be kind to me. Now I believe that that's because I was clear on who I am, unapologetic about who I am. Yes, I had some self-consciousness about it, but I didn't bring that there.
Yeah.
And I think people felt comfortable around me. Same thing in the neighborhood that I raised my kids in. When John and I moved into the neighborhood around the corner from my ex-wife, we had all the same friends as my ex-wife and all my kids, and it was fine.
Yeah.
But like, I wasn't offensive and I wasn't defensive about it. Like, this is me, this is my life. So I don't even know if that's important to get into that. I think I'm defending my gay cred.
No, I think it's interesting. You've helped clarify something to me with respect to sort of C-suite culture. So there's this aspect of professionalism. You can be who you are, but at that level, you're there to work, and you're there to perform, and you're
You're
there
there to
to
perform, right? You're there to perform. Nobody
yeah,
gives a shit about anything. If you perform, they don't care who you're sleeping with.
yeah, yeah,
Perform. Tim. Now I want to call him Tim Apple now.
yeah.
Uh, from Apple,
Tim
uh,
Cook.
Tim Cook is CEO because he's the person who should be CEO, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like that's number one. He has to perform.
yeah,
And oh, by the way, and he did it. Is like, oh, by the way, I'm gay.
yeah.
I feel like I should come out and tell people because I should support the community.
Yeah.
But that's not a big part of I'm a workaholic guy. Like that's my thing,
That's his badge of honor, exactly.
right?
Yeah. So I sort of want to transition, Mark, into general concepts of leadership and self mastery from your book, Only Tens 2.0. Tell us a little bit about that book. It's a 2.0 for a reason, which was very clearly written in the introduction.
Sure. I wrote the book for myself as an ode to trying to run a business with ADD.
Yeah.
I wanted to figure out why it was so hard for me to get stuff done.
Yeah.
So I decided the summer of 2015 that I was going to get a PhD in how to get things done with ADD.
Yeah.
And one of some of the things that were makes perfect sense is you narrow it down. What's really important to you? Figure out what your
Mhm.
values is. One of the things that I noticed was I only do what I want to do, and I don't do what I don't want to do.
Yeah.
Only always. right? I only do what I want to do. If I want to do something, I don't procrastinate. I don't have
Mm-hmm.
ADD. It
Mm-hmm.
happens. If I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to do something, I'll say I want to do it and it'll never happen. So I
Mm-hmm.
started to learn that I lied to myself and I lied to other people about what I was willing to do, what I'm going to do. I'm also a people pleaser, right? I'm all things to all people all the time. So I say yes to everything
Mm-hmm.
and then wind up dropping things out and not keeping deadlines, right? So I get overwhelmed by stuff. So I started to look at the to-do list. And what I realized was that I was not discerning on what I put on my plate to accomplish. And I was feeding my dopamine receptors on my to-do list. I was feeding my fears on my to-do list. I was doing things not to disappoint people. I wasn't doing things because I was scared not to. And then I started to see that everything that was on my list had very little to do with who I was and what I wanted to accomplish. Or there would be things on my list about that were who I was and what I want to accomplish, but they took a back seat to everybody else.
Right.
So I wrote this book for myself. I published it. I wrote it in 90 days, and it sold 1,500 copies in the first day.
Mm-hmm.
Then it sold 1,500 copies again, and then people are saying to me, "Oh my God." Like they give the book to these CEOs, and like someone gave the book to you, and
Oh.
it's like, what is going on here with the book? And my ex-wife is like, dude, you don't have that many friends. Who's buying this book? So the book has just transformed my life. The 2.0 version was I was about to write my next book, and my publisher, who happens to be my book coach and publisher, who happens to be in Toronto, Patty Hall, she said, you have to rewrite only tens because you've been coaching on it for 5 years, you've been living it, you've been teaching it, and now it's become a much more of a leadership book.
Yeah.
A little bit, it's just a heftier book in the 2.0.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm freed up to write my next book,
Nice.
which is going to be the Rising Leader Handbook.
Perfect. Well, that's actually a nice segue from what that book is about into your next one. So, what you wrote somewhere in the introduction, early on in the book, the great masters agree the path to true freedom is inquiry, self-inquiry. The to-do list is relegated to low-level consciousness, and when evaluated, has us pausing to ask, do I even want to do this? We get to unpack each choice. We get to see what resentment has to teach us. This introspection awakens us to personal truth. Only tens breaks the road to finding out who we truly might be into small, doable segments. It's that last bit that I just loved. I like
I
it.
wrote that shit. Oh my God.
Who we might be. It breaks the road to finding out who we truly might be into small, doable segments. Because we think our path to greatness, and I want to do this, I want to accomplish this, and it seems so grand, and that's not possible. Well, I mean, it's possible, but how to
Not
do it
practical. It's
seems
not.
impossible.
Yeah. So great. I just came back from a weekend. I was just on a weekend retreat with this spiritual leader that I've been following for years, and he teaches a specific kind of self inquiry.
Yeah.
And I came back from that workshop just really peaceful and with a new tool in my tool belt.
Mm-hmm.
Then I started thinking about only tens because it's such a big part of my life. And what I realized is what I wrote back then was the beginning of self inquiry for me. You
Yeah.
look at something on your to do list and then you evaluate it. Is
Yeah.
this something I want to do?
Yeah.
Why do I want to do it?
Mm-hmm.
If I don't want to do it, why am I saying I'm going to do it? What conversations am I not willing to have? Right? Where am I repressed? Can I not show anger? Can I not ask for help? Can I not set a boundary? Right?
Mm.
Everything is in the to-do list here.
Yeah.
And then everything is on what's not on the to-do list. What am I dropping out? Who am I putting in front of what I say is important? And now we have a tool to understand who we are. And I joke that I can look at someone's to-do list and I can tell you, I can look at it like tarot cards, and I can tell people what they like, what they don't like, how they grew up, what they're
Yeah.
afraid of, just from their to-do list and and their relationship to it.
Yeah.
So for me, that whole thing of, oh my God, I don't know how to set boundaries.
Yeah.
I don't know how to say no. I don't know how to tell someone you're important to me but I just, someone, one of my shaman, a friend, he's like, Mark, I've dreamt about you every day this week, and you really need to come to my retreat.
Yeah.
I mean, like, don't you, like, oh my God, of course I need to go to his retreat in Mexico. I love this guy and he's been dreaming about me. So of course I need to go.
Yes.
And it doesn't hurt that he looks like he just came off of a romance novel, thing. But he's like, Mark, I've been dreaming about you and you must come to my retreat. And I know myself enough. I am an internal, my internal no is there. I'm not going to the retreat.
Yeah.
So how do I say to him, you're a 10 for me. I love you. You mean the world to me. And I'm not coming to your retreat. 10 years ago, I would have gone into debt and, done everything I can to be at that retreat just to please him and keep that relationship because I'm terrified of losing that connection.
Oh,
so those are the kinds of things that I learned from writing Only Tens.
You just made me aware from that story of when you said the 10 years ago I would have gone into debt. Hello. The money I've invested in training in the past, I recognize had to do with fulfilling my need to feel like I was smart enough. It was like one of my core motivators is that, it was like the pro and the con. It's like, I am freaking smart. I almost didn't get through high school, but I went to college, got an A- average, went to university, had an A- average, Dean's List every year, full scholarship and master's, 10-month scholarship to go study in Germany, a month award scholarship to study in Amsterdam at a queer studies program. Because then I was doing things in the way that I wanted to do. But then when I went out and started doing, non-university level, like moving into personal training and all this stuff to feel like I was capable and I was smart enough, I had to invest in the best training, which I couldn't afford at the time.
Right.
And then I wound up being bullied by the person that was running that program. And when I finally said, I think I'm going to have to leave, he just said, okay, in an email. And that was it after 4 years. And that was an interesting lesson that you've just reminded me of, how what I wasn't prioritizing at that time was,
and what you were prioritizing, right?
Yes.
I have to feel good about myself at all costs. I don't care what it costs.
Yes.
Debt isn't as important as this feeling I must have.
Yeah.
And that's where the self-inquiry comes in, is can I sit with the feeling of lack?
Yes.
And most of us can't.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an interesting one. There's more review that I need to do of Only Tens, because there's always something in a different framework or a unique framework that can be taken. I've sort of used the one thing idea on the day,
one
on the
thing,
week.
essentialism. I love all those books. For me, the reason Only Tens works for me is because they don't explain to me why I can't do what they tell me to do.
Yeah.
That was my problem. Is of course I know I should focus on the one thing. Of course I should pay attention to what's essential, all that stuff. Why can't I? Oh, because I'm terrified of everybody else.
Right. That bit, I have one-sided my coaching that I will address with through sort of neuroscience. If you've got emotional alignment with something, then that's going to be your motivation, right? That's going to be the inspiration to go forward and do something. Align that with this scale of 10. And if it's a 9.5 on the emotional scale, but not a 10, in your eyes, in your book, in your framework, it's like, no, don't do it. It just means that this is really important to you, but it is not the priority, right? And to be able to understand how our brain works in that way. But there was something you wrote in the book about also when certain fears are a 10. Tell me a little bit more about that.
So like you just stated it, fear of not being smart enough, right? Of having that credential that will make you go do something.
Yeah.
It'll also make you not do something.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm pivoting. My whole brand is changing to the rising leader. So what I do for a living is I coach executives who are in the C-suite. Right. So, but I've never wanted to hang my shingle out and say, this is who I am.
Yeah.
Because I never wanted to be like compete with Simon Sinek and Tony Robbins and all those people and say I'm a leadership coach. I
Yeah.
never thought of myself that way. Um, my view of myself was smaller than that and a little bit different. So mastering midlife, mastering overwhelm, I'll just skirt on all that stuff until I realized what I do all day, every day is coach leaders in the C-suite, right? On the senior leadership team. I do that all day, every day. I coach
Mm-hmm.
freaking billionaires, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm stepping out. And it was years ago that people said, no, this is what you should be doing, Mark. This should be your branding. This should be everything. I'm like, no, I'm going to do the midlife thing. I wanted to stay safe. Only in hindsight do I see, actually, this was the right thing for me to be doing. I was just too scared.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm still scared. I
Yeah.
still feel self-conscious. I still have those internal traumas of don't be seen, don't, all that stuff. Don't compete. Part of it's, since this is a gay podcast, part of it is because I was a gay guy on sports teams. I was a gay guy on sales teams, right? And I would hear the locker room talk about people like me.
Yeah.
Although even though, because I had a wife and kids, nobody knew that it was people like me at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So it felt uncomfortable to step out in front,
Mm-hmm.
right? So now I'm stepping out in front in all my full glory at 60 years old, because
Mm-hmm.
this is what I do all day, every day. And and for me, I've now learned to live with the fear that goes on inside.
Yeah.
Right. I can, both can be true. I can step out and I can feel fear. And I can be that guy.
With what you said here, I think it was Tony Robbins who popularized or at least made famous this idea of you're either moving towards pleasure or you're moving away from discomfort. But the question I asked you earlier about when my fear was a 10, in the work that you're doing, how motivating, propelling is it going to be for somebody to, make that change or transformation that they need if that 10 is actually a fear versus some sort of a higher calling or on more of like a empowering emotion as opposed to a threat?
So I was home. When I came to DC back in 1989, I was 135 pounds, living in my truck and homeless.
Yeah.
I was an alcoholic, a drunk, sex addict. And several years later, I was a millionaire, right?
Mm-hmm.
Married, 2 kids. That's my little short Jewish Tony Robbins story kind of thing, right? But what's interesting is what got me to be successful, what got me to make all that money was I never wanted anybody to see me as that homeless guy ever again. Right? I never wanted anybody. So I worked my ass off. That fear propelled me.
Okay.
Right. And that's the whole premise of midlife, right? Those traumas, those choices, the conditioning, everything that gets you through your 20s and 30s and gets you to that success.
Yeah. Right.
It's successful. It does it. But if you want to go to the next level of success, or if you even want to maintain it, something's got to give, because that's sugar. That's not fuel that's sustainable.
Okay.
When you're doing something out of fear, or you're not doing something out of fear, you can do it. It can burst you through, but it's not sustainable. You have to now shift, and your internal guidance is going to tell you you can keep doing this, but you have to do it a different way. Mm-hmm. And it's either going to be sickness, job change, relationship, train wreck. Something's going to happen, in midlife that tells you that something's got to give. But if you can do that beforehand and start to know who you are, now you can start to make actual conscious choices.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you for that. Given one's circumstances, the 10, the ultimate priority or reason that's going to propel you forward. Taking all of that and what we've talked about so far, what would then be, the conversations you need to learn as a change maker or a thought leader or a creative if you want to change your impact and change your life? I mean, for myself, just as an example, I'm what would be called a multi-passionate creator. Part of my ADD and part of me also trying to rein in and go, okay, well, what's my 10 here? What am I supposed to be doing? Right. What are these conversations that I need to learn? What are these changes that I may need to focus on? Or fictitiously, someone like me who's not me.
Right. So I'm a little confused by your question. So let me see if I can understand, because there's the coach question that I get all the time is, how do I figure out what my thing is to go forward in the world?
Right.
And then there's the, what do I need to learn in order to just in my business, in my life, in my organization, in my family, start to live my authentic self, and not be buffeted about by everybody else. I'm sure. Which direction are you taking me here?
I think probably the key word for me is multi-passionate creator. In that,
Okay, got it. If you're rich, go on and be a multi-passionate creator.
right?
If you can afford it, paint, do a podcast, write books, travel, do it all. If you're not rich, you got to decide what's a distraction,
Yeah.
what's your art,
Yeah.
and then what's your money thing.
Yeah.
What are you going to make a living at?
Yeah.
Right. So I just got a call from my son. My son is studying to be a Hasidic rabbi. So he's been in school for a long time and he's got no money. Right. So he went to a wedding in another country. Guess who paid for the ticket? Right. I paid for the ticket. And I said to him, now this is his passion. It has lit him up. The power and wisdom and the groundedness that comes from him is breathtaking. So because he's not on a corporate career path, of course I would like him in khakis and a polo shirt under fluorescent lights with healthcare and all that stuff. But I've never seen the kid so alive and just so grounded and so good. So I'm good, right? But he goes to this other country and he's got the money and he's got everything planned out. And as I'm driving to the airport, dad in me is like, I'm about to give him $100. And I'm like, don't give him $100. You're always doing things for people that they haven't, like, just to keep your money. So I'm sitting in my kitchen, proud of myself, several hours later, that I didn't give him the $100. Phone rings. Dad, it's Jake. I made it. I'm in my hotel. Damn, everything's so expensive. The taxi was this. I didn't know I was going to have to pay for a hotel room. I thought I was staying with my friend and all my money's gone.
Yeah.
And so, of course, he's in Mexico. So, of course, I'm going to give him the money to stay safe and take care. That's not where I want to teach him a life lesson. Yeah. But I did say, let's have a conversation about this is why I want you to understand what you're doing when you say you want to be a rabbi, right? Yeah. You're going to have to make choices, right? Life is expensive. It costs money to do things, right? I want you to follow your passion. Yeah. But how are you going to feed your family? How are you going to get healthcare? We live in America. If you don't have healthcare, you're dead. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So let's have a conversation about those things. And by the way, here's $180. I love you. Yeah. Stay safe. Yeah. Right. So the same thing with the creatives. We have all these things, let's just talk about me being a coach. When I became a coach, I became a life coach. My heart was open and all I wanted to do was heal people. And I love people and I just cared about people and I was broke. Plenty of people loved me and said, Mark changed my life, but they weren't paying me. Yeah. And I was taking care of an ex-wife, 2 kids, elderly parents, all this stuff. And the finances went from fine to worse, to worse, to worse. Yeah. But I don't want to sell out for the money. But I realized I am running a business here. And, unless I want to go live as a roommate in somebody else's house, and live a life of poverty and just help people, I got to figure out how to become professional. Yeah. And that was a hard choice for me to say, I'm professional. Then I realized one of the places I love being, I missed my Hugo Boss suits. I missed getting dressed up and going into an office. I love people who are creating businesses and things like that. So I pivoted to the people who had money, right? The people who are accomplishing things, who also need the same help that I give, right? I get calls from their wives saying, what did you do to my husband? Thank you. Like, he's so less stressed and he's so present and, he's so different. Now, I don't sell that. I don't say, I'm going to help you be present. I teach you leadership skills. I teach you how to get promoted. I teach you all these things. So I had to learn to be professional and take care of my financial house. Yeah. And I paint and I help people when, without, charging, because I have money in the bank. I can help people, that kind of thing. But when you're creative, it's really easy to flush your own financial well-being down the toilet.
Absolutely. I understand. That's something I've been struggling with
Bit of
for a
a
very
rant.
long
I'm
time.
sorry. Right.
Hmm?
But you're such a talented guy.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons I complimented on your writing is because you actually had a point of view and it was a
Hmm.
solid, useful point of view. And I wanted you to know that you
Hmm.
can make money with you've done the research, you've spent years honing your skill,
Hmm.
right? Now it's time to think of yourself as a professional
Yeah.
with a skill to be offered and to be paid for.
Yeah.
And it's hard for us creatives.
Yeah. It is, because that's like that the it's a weird label, multi-passionate. Um, because like a label can oppress other opportunities or can distract from
You got to
that
figure out what
one.
your nines are. So you've
Exactly.
got a lot of nines in your life,
Oh, a hell of a lot.
right?
Yeah.
And you're flushing your tens down for your nines.
Yeah. 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 Good point. I got some homework to do after this. I love it.
I wanted to go with my shaman so badly. I can
Yeah.
afford it. Like I have the time, I have the money, I can do it. But I'm writing a new book and I'm creating a new course,
Yeah.
right? So I actually told him it's about 90 days, about 90 days before this is all done. If when this is done, there's still a space for me, I'm
Yeah.
totally in. But I've learned that I have shiny object syndrome, and that
Yeah.
shiny object will flush down the thing that's really important to me.
That's a great story, because that's something I've definitely become better at, is looking at all the shining objects and going, no, I can't afford this, or no, while this might be interesting, where this usually happens for me is ideas. So I love these second brain softwares. I use Roam. A lot of people use Notion. So for me, what really helps with getting rid of the nines is I can quickly outline the idea and I can park it in a way that I can find it if it's ever of use to me in the future.
Lovely.
But
Perfect.
then it's out of my head, so that I'm not thinking, oh crap, this is such a great idea. Could I do something with it? No, I'm going to detail it. I get it all out of my head. It's done. Now I go back to my 10 work.
Brilliant.
Yeah. And that has been an immensely helpful shift in how I think and how I process information. So,
That's so smart. I interviewed Tiago Forte on my podcast.
oh
Uh,
wow.
what a gentle, lovely, smart guy.
Yeah.
You would think that he would be one of those automatrons with the second brain thing, and
Yeah.
just so. Or he's such a warm, lovely guy, and he's simplified his program so much. He's really, really cool guy.
I'll have to listen to that. And if I'm correct, his book is Smart Notes.
No, his book is creating a second brain.
Creating a second brain. Yeah. I think he's sort of the go-to person for this idea about smart notes or second brain software like Roam or Notion or what have you.
Yeah, brilliant guy. But he says, we just overcomplicated it. He
Yeah.
says it's just a filing cabinet. Figure
Yeah,
out what your filing cabinet is.
exactly. Well, let me ask you a couple of wrap-up questions and then a final input from you. What would you say is your core message or philosophy? Perhaps there could be two. It could be your approach to life in general, or there could be a separation between life and the work you do in business.
No, my core message is you're free. You've always been free. You've never
Yeah.
known you've been free, but you're always been free. You have choice. You're not a victim of anything, and you don't have to do anything. You only do what you want to do, and you don't do what you don't want to do. Only always. And if you look at that, you'll see that you've always been free. You've just been making choices.
Yeah. Just been making choices, and you've also been making some excuses that have led to those choices. Yeah.
Making excuses is a choice.
Yes, true. Yeah, beautiful. And I
I
think
can
you
only
probably
say
are.
this because I was there. Like I'm an ex-smoker. I get
Yes.
it, right? So I have to remind myself every day that I'm free. That victim mentality comes in all the time, and I'm like, I am free. I don't have to pay this tax bill. I really don't. I'd rather not have the consequences.
Yes.
So I'll choose to, right? So
Beautiful. Yeah. You may have already said this, but what's your 10 for the rest of 2022?
So talk about distractions. So my son calls me up, and he lives in Dallas, and he says, and he knows George Strait's my favorite singer, and George Strait doesn't do many concerts anymore. And he says, "Dad, for your birthday, I think I'm going to have, I'm asking you to spend money, but I think you'd really like this. Uh, uh, you, Jake, my other son, my rabbi son, and I go to George Strait in Fort Worth in November.
Mm-hmm.
Now, going to the retreat was a 9, but I wasn't going. I was like, yep, don't have to ask me twice. Right?
Good.
My sons and I at a George Strait concert, right? Tickets were $2,100. Mm-hmm. Still have to pay for my rabbi son to come with us and all that stuff. But it was like, that's a 10. Like my kids, an experience with my kids. Yeah, I'll even go into debt for that shit. But for that, and then creating the course is the course in the book with my kids, and then another ayahuasca journey coming up in October. So I'm kind of excited by that. And that should handle 2021.
2022.
Oh, is it 2022? Oh, and also I'd love to plan another epic vacation with my husband.
Amazing.
He had me get scuba dive certified last year. So I want to go scuba diving again.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, thank you, Mark. I mean, this has been, for me, enlightening. There's some additional information I've learned that I secretly programmed some of the questions for myself to find out how you might respond. But I really appreciate what you've brought, and I'd love to give you the final word. Anything that you want to say or add or comment on about what we've spoken about today.
I would say, dude, you are so wise, and you're so clear in what you offer that I think that people should follow you on your social media channels, because you alchemize everything that you brought in such a clear and concise way. So I think people should follow you and learn a lot. That's my final word.
Amazing. Thank you. I'm going to have all the links so that people can find you and get your books. Is there one specific place or two places that people can
just
find
you? Just go to my website, markjsilverman.com, markletterjsilverman.com. There's a red banner on the top of my website. Most of my clients are ADD and will not read my book. So they say, Mark, can you make little 5-minute videos of everything you teach? Yeah. Yes. So I put that on the website. There's also a free copy. If they want a free copy of Only 10s 2.0, they can go to that link. There is a free PDF copy that they can read on their Kindle, and they can read the book for free.
Awesome. Great. I will have those links in the episode notes. And thank you again for your time and your wisdom today.
I'm so glad we connected.
Thanks, Mark. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode with Mark Silverman. And if you're a struggling creator or change maker, wondering, how can I make a difference in the world? How can I create a thriving business at the same time and enjoy happiness and peace of mind and greater freedom? If you're asking yourself those questions, let's meet for a conversation. I'm curious to learn what motivates you, what drives you, what inspires you to want to make a difference in the world or create the business of your dreams, and what steps that you can take to actually move in that direction with greater ease and success. So I invite you to book a free coaching discovery session with me. Just click on the link below in the show notes and we'll have a discussion.